I'm gonna turn to Paul. Paul, how are you doing?
Good, pal. How you doing? Glad to
I'm
see
very
you
well, thank you.
in my home country.
Uh,
Fantastic.
yeah, I was just saying this when we were off camera. We've done a bit of a switcheroo. So you're in England and I'm in Scotland.
I'm down here in London now for 10 years, but I go back every now and again. So I miss the homeland. But it's been 8.5 years since I've stopped drinking, and so yeah, that's what we were talking about before. Like I don't think I'm really allowed back in Scotland anymore. I can go back and forward in a visa. I think that's it. But the culture has changed quite a lot, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it's,
I, I'm coming up for 3 years off the booze, and that's the only way they let me back across the border. So yeah, I've heard they're starting doing breathalyzers when you get to Gretna.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, quite half bottle of Buckfast or a wee nip.
Yeah, 100%.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, I've got to say, in the last week, I've probably consumed 10 years worth of tatty scones and lawn sausage and all the rest of it. So I'm going to be coming back probably about 3 stone heavier.
Fantastic.
So, Paul, in terms of when we first met, we met in May. We met at UK Reef. So, you and I have got a mutual friend, Louise. I'm just going to have a look see if Louise has actually joined us tonight. She is going to join us very soon, though. She's not in here yet. But Louise was one of my colleagues when I was at Landtech, and stayed in touch with Louise and her partner Mark. And she introduced us at UK Reef, and we started talking about sort of your business, and it's not been going that long, has it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the business has been going for 8.5 years.
Yeah.
The kind of technology side of things, about 4 years ago, we started building a kind of data set, and now it's a technology business and a kind of consultancy as well. So, yeah, there's been a lot of changes over the last few years.
Amazing. And can you tell us a bit about, what in terms of what it does? Because it really feeds into what we're talking about tonight around HMOs.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen some of the questions, and some of them are relative to my experience, and then some of them are hopefully I can give some guidance, but might not be perfect. So yeah, I can. I think you're going to go through kind of like how I actually got to be running a compliance business, which is an interesting story. But yeah, basically, is a complex property compliance business. What that means is that every business in the every landlord in the UK and it knows the kind of simple compliance that they need to do. Everything needs it. You need a gas, you need electrical, you need EPC. But complex property compliance is when it changes based on the exact location of the property. So we've got a kind of geospatial mapping system that maps out all the properties and all of the legislation. And then it obviously changes based on if it's a flat house or a building. And then it changes again based if it's short let, long let landlord, shared house, HMO, build to rent, whatever it is, basically, as well as a common parts. So Louise has jumped on the webinar because I've sent her that link. So hi Louise, great to meet
Hi,
you.
Louise.
She's decided to go. Oh, she can't even hear us. This is fantastic news. So now she's just on the webinar with us.
I'm on it.
You're on the webinar. You're live with everybody else. Say hi.
Oh gosh. Okay, hi.
Right, Louise, what I'm going to do is I will take
Keep
you.
her here. Keep it. This is fantastic. It's a lot less pressure for me.
All right, fair enough.
She's going to run away.
She's going to be fuming with you after this.
I know. Oh
There we
no.
go.
She's gone. She's gone. Right, let's kick her out. Can't be having that.
So you were saying, Paul, before
So
we were rudely interrupted.
that was totally my fault because I sent her the link. I didn't know I had a host link. My apologies to everybody for ruining the show. But that was quite a good experience. I think it's going to be fine. So complex property compliance. So it changes the location, the type of property, and then how it's occupied. So that things that do that are things like licensing, planning permission, fire safety, the Building Safety Act, and of course like energy retrofit and various advice around that. So that's the kind of things we cover. We cover purely residential property compliance when it gets a little bit more complicated. So yeah, we have a technology solution and a consultancy solution that kind of marries it up together. So the technology is kind of like a fine prevention service. So you can monitor your entire private rented sector stock, and we do that from big agents, big landlords, all the way down to individual landlords. And essentially what that's doing is telling you exactly what legislation you need to comply to, and constantly monitoring for new legislation as well. And when new legislation comes up, we'll say, hey, these 2 properties within your portfolio require you to take these steps so that you can remain compliant. So as you know, when it comes to compliance, it's about get to compliance and then remain there.
Yeah. And in terms of the sort of compliance measures, would you say that there's been a real emphasis in the last few years on getting compliance for those properties? I know that when I've been out to certain properties in the past, it's obviously not going to be compliant just by the state of them, but there seems to be post Grenfell, post sort of moving towards the renters reform bill, there seems to be a whole professionalism of the sector that's coming in to make sure that these building reports, compliance reports are all allocated and all there so that people can view them if there are any issues with the tenants or with the properties, and that they know that they're all up to scratch.
Yeah, there's a complete minefield of all the things that popped in my head when you were saying that. So yeah, so obviously when it comes to fire, the Grenfell came into the Building Safety Act, so that's going to be dependent on whether you're hitting the 11-meter rule or the 18-meter rule, and there's complexities around that. Then of course, then British standards changed. The BS 5839 changed in 2019, had a revision. Of course, fire risk assessments have changed to be, you now have to meet the British standard, and then fire risk assessments have minimum levels of qualification. So there's so many versions of what you're saying. And of course, with the Renters' Rights Act came in, and we're obviously waiting for implementation dates. All of these things are just adding more and more complexity. So parts of what we do are getting more difficult to comply to, and when especially with the Renters' Rights Act and essentially the PRS database, as you say. So where are things stored? How are the government and the local councils seeing that oversight of everything? What's changing with licensing and PRS database, and how all those things tie in together? It's really complicated. So we have seen, although, like, from our perspective, a lot of the Renters' Right Act stuff is around tenancy, and we're more property orientated. We do cover that. These things are when you have an increased complexity in other areas and lots of things changes. There's some basics that you just really need to take care of. To kind of like emphasize your point, like we did an analysis on there was an Italian company that was buying a UK based shared living company, 114 assets or something like that, HMOs of 3 beds up to multiple units, 30, 40 units in a couple of buildings that hit the Building Safety Act. They've been through that journey for the last 10 years, and they've had conversations with different councils along the way, and they're kind of extrapolating information from people that they know, and I spoke to the council, and this guy said this, and this girl said this, and they have a basis of knowledge, of understanding. And when we reviewed that portfolio, it was a mess. Like, there was no fire stopping under the escape routes. The fire doors were not fire doors. They weren't shutting properly. There was strips missing. There's so many aspects of it that are based on information that you pick up along the way, and that's the dangerous part of it. You don't know what you don't know. I guess that's why we called the company,
Yeah. So in terms of a perfect scenario for this, people know that I live in Coventry, and Coventry was named as one of the local authorities that's going bust. And what they've done in an effort to try and generate revenue for the local authority, the local council, is that they have put together a crack team that are specifically targeting HMOs and multi-lets, and going into those properties and finding where they're not compliant, and then basically fining them thousands of pounds for fire exit sign not being in the right place, or the wrong label being on the fire alarm system, that kind of thing. And those fines are just escalating year on year in terms of the amount that the local council is making from them. And what you're saying is, with that you are basically there before that happens, so you're able to go in and basically assess the property or give advice to HMO landlords that potentially are worried about where the gaps are and where they're missing that level of compliance.
Yeah, so yeah, there's two aspects of it to, as you say. So there's a digital aspect, which is monitoring portfolios and creating those actions and what you need to do. And then you've got sub actions that come out of things, out of the various risk assessments. So let's say look at LACORs under fire safety for the fire safety guidance, or BS 5839, or etc. etc. And so there's so many elements of that. So some of it's technology based and some of it's consultancy based. So yeah, so if you've got licensing, we have environmental health officers that are accredited by the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health and experienced in local councils. We have fire risk assessors, top level level 4 fire risk assessor, IFE, etc., and they oversee all the fire risk assessments. If it's a residential fire risk assessment, is also overseen by an environmental health officer, so that you align those guidance elements and so that you're not over and under specking. So all these things kind of tie together. And then if you require Article 4 planning or Sweden S planning, what's the likelihood of passing? And then if you do pass, what would you need to do, and how you can kind of tie all those things together. So the elements of are more around kind of tying the things together so you don't make a mistake. It's really difficult, like the complexities and the costs behind that, like where you're trying to prove that somebody's competent to do something, and that comes down to accreditation, and then you're like, okay, so you have to speak to a HMO landlord that's, and any landlord that's trying to make a profit, but also try to keep people safe, and you're trying to give them guidance, and then saying, look, well, it's a grade A alarm system. Maybe you should use a BAFE accredited engineer. Maybe it's fire stopping or fire doors. So we're looking at BM Trada Q mark or fire ass, etc. And these things become super expensive, because then you have obviously they're servicing a commercial world, so the commercial premises, etc., and the prices are just obscene. So it's trying to kind of like marry that all up into something that, when it comes to risk, reasonable and practical. So that's the kind of difficult part of the line that you're trying to always follow, is that we know we need to make the place safe. We know we need to do certain things at certain times, but we also need to make sure that it's reasonable and practical, which is a difficult line to follow.
Yeah, definitely. And the sort of theme of this webinar was HMO horror stories. You've obviously seen a whole mixture of different properties and different portfolios where some are managed really, really well, some are disastrous. In terms of when you go, what kind of properties have you seen that have been best case scenario in terms of making sure that they've got everything in a line? When you're working with, say, a HMO landlord, what would give you the sign that they've got it together?
I think it's always the same, isn't it? It's organization. Like, is everything organized? Do you have the dates of everything? Do you know when to do things? Do you have some sort of record keeping that shows that at least you're giving it a damn good shot? and a lot of that. I mean, a lot of the things you mentioned about HMO officers or environmental health officers picking things up and fining, like we've been involved in so many of those things. Like, UNO's job here is to protect you. Like, that's what we are. There's red pills and blue pills. We're a blue pill. Like, we're the guy that makes sure that you know what you need to do so that you can protect yourself. And then there's companies out there like a partner of ours, Des Taylor, that runs a business that's purely about defending you if you're already in trouble. So you can choose whichever route you want to go down. Do you want to protect yourself, or do you want to defend yourself in due course? And of course, like, we have David Smith on our board, which is a massive industry name in private rented sector compliance. And and if it goes seriously wrong, you probably need one of him. And so, like, all of these things are there is complexity, and there's a different way of doing things. And it's like, how, as you say, do you want to protect yourself? Do you want to do it right? What's reasonable to do that? We can give you the guidance, we can give you the information. And a lot of that comes down to when people say, like, oh, well, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with that. At the end of the day, there's is obviously, there's always black and white and there's always grey. But at the end of the day, our job is to make sure that people know what they need to do, and advise them on the right people and the right accreditations to use. And at least then we've given the right information, and they know what they need to do. That's what we do.
Awesome. Well, we always like to start on a positive note. So let's go into the nitty-gritty of it. What's some of the worst stuff you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, again, it comes down to there was a landlord whose surname was also Conway, but not related, and lovely guy, and he was just trying to do a really good job, you know, of being a landlord, and he was keeping his prices of his rent 40% below, you know, and he's got this guy he's got a guy on benefits, and he's got these guys, and he's just trying to keep a place like to a certain level so that he can provide accommodation, and he makes his little bit, you know, and he makes in it. But the place was a hellhole, you know, like it was not taken care of. There's no such thing as alarm systems, fire alarms. There was no fire stop and no fire doors or anything. But there's an attempt. So he's heard that it should close. So there's a £6 auto closer on it, and there's a tree growing in through the living room window, through the kitchen window, and things are coming out. There's kind of mold there, but the guys are okay because they're paying a bit less, you know. So there's those kind of guys that are like, that's an extreme example. I haven't seen that as an extreme example of just somebody that's trying to provides a service to people that he wants to do a good job and keep them in housing. But the risk he took was massive amount of risk for trying to create a good place for people. Well, not trying to give it, just giving people somewhere to live, you know. And that's what his goal was, and he wanted to do that and do as cheap place possible. And he didn't quite understand the steps that need to be taken, even when given to him. And then you get people that are, you know, as you see on very many, like you talk about horror stories. Like the interesting thing about YUNO is that we aren't in that part of the market, you know. So that is an example of what YUNO's got involved in, because he was like, I know I have a problem, but I don't really understand it, and I want to sort it, but it scares the living daylight of me, and I don't have enough money to do it because he's not charging enough money. And then you get like things where people are completely overcrowded, and the place is a complete mess, and people are deliberately doing things wrong, you know.
Yeah.
And again, that comes down to that red pill and blue pill thing, where we're very much about protection, but the people that are in this world of actual horror stories, the things you see in the news, that's not what our business is. We attract people that want to do a good job and do it right, you know, and provide a safe place to live. So we don't attract those sort of people to see those kind of the real slums behind what you would see in the news or on a specific program, etc. And it's a world that maybe like Des Taylor would be in, because he's got a landlord that has just got himself in a serious amount of trouble for not doing anything. As you say, it comes down to, these aren't like small things. Like when the council have powers to do £30,000 per offence, you know, or 12 months worth of rent, now doubling to 24 months worth of rent reclaim. It's a huge amount of money, you know, and it's crippling people. And the whole thing about the PRS database, the licensing, the compliance, the enforcement, all these changes, it's fugazi. It's all about money. They're skint. The councils are skint. Everybody's skint. They need to make some money. And that's what licensing and compliance and the PRS database and all this enforcement is all about. It's making sure that they can bring enough revenue in. I'm a big advocate for keeping people safe. It's something that I like. There originally, I think you said you were going to go into like in due course, like how I kind of came about. But the simple thing for me is like, even if I'm in a family home and it's over 3 floors, like, why is the minimum regulation that you need a smoke alarm on each level? And I'll probably annoy loads of landlords and say, well, with this, you know, cost and all that. But at the end of the day, like, look, let's just put 10-year lithium battery smoke alarms in there. Let's link them together. Because if there's a fire on the ground floor, you're on the top floor and your kids are on the first floor, you know, you're not going to hear the alarm system. It's not linked together, you know, it's not tested, you know, like having a 10-liter lithium batteries that are linked together is a kind of minimum standard in my eyes, you know, and that's kind of like, right, I know so confusing to try to figure out how that changes. Why are you in this kind of Smoke and Carbon Act world, and why are you inside? When does the British standards kick in? BS 5839 changes everything. Why do you need this? Why do you need that? And that whole confusion of what we're doing in our co-living world before was why I kind of fell into it, and why I like it, I guess.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you said that in terms of where you position yourself. That you know, we talk about horror stories, but you're never positioned to attract the maliciously ignorant. You are, you know, you are positioned to support those landlords that are looking to do something better, or to make sure that they're protected, make sure that they are offering the most compliant sort of property, and you're there to carry them along on that journey to ensure that they get there.
Yeah, and so like I give you an example less on the horror stories of safety. Like, for example, we got contacted by a landlord a few years ago, an investor. Again, the compliance is not just about it's coming down. It comes down to, will I? Let's say it's an Article 4 HMO directive. Will I pass planning permission? What's the likelihood of passing? Do I need it? Is it an Article 4 area? Yes, our system will tell you that. Do I need, which licensing? Do I need a license for this? What is it? The HMO manager regulations? Is it license? Is it planning? What do I need to do? So this landlord came to us, is like, I've only got a license in planning for 6 people, but I've built a 16-bed HMO. I had not very happy investors because he couldn't get any more, because he hadn't done a pre-application, because that's compliance at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
Before you go through that journey, will I pass planning? Will I get licensing? Does my license, will I comply to the licensing and planning guidance? You know, and that's again why our environmental health officers will get involved. So yeah, we've got a company that we work with, a HMO designing company, and they do the more complex things. But we're overseeing. We work with people's architects. Our environmental health officer will just sit alongside that architect company that we provide and we partner with, or your own architect, you know, and making sure that they get the right spatial compliance in there, get the right fire safety, take care of the fire strategy behind it, and making sure that you make the right steps along the way. Because at the end of the day, compliance is about getting to the end and actually delivering the asset that will give the return. So that's maybe the sexier side of the compliance, if there's a sexy side of compliance.
I'm sure there is, Paul. I'm sure there is.
We'll find it. We'll discover it in this call.
Definitely. So in terms of the kinds of people that you work with on a day-to-day basis, I mean, you said that you work from anyone from a standard landlord right up to some bigger portfolios. Is it a mix of the kinds of people that you're working with, or is it, you know, pretty straightforward, as we said, the proactive, professionalized landlord and accommodation companies that are looking to work with you?
Yeah, so like there's a really interesting ICP or ideal client profile that even we've had a few landlords that have came to us, and then we kind of now advertise for that kind of specific landlord. So like we've had landlords that are kind of cash rich. They come to us and they're like, okay, cool, I want to build out a HMO portfolio, and all I want to do is get it right, you know. And they seem to, which is interesting, they read up on everything, they understand it. And they seem to get everything, and most of it, they're like 95% right. But and I'm just like, look, you probably don't need to engage with us on these things. Is it? No, I need to. I want to make sure that every step of this journey is covered. You know, and that's like a personality type. So you've got a personality type that are making sure that each step of the journey is covered, but they really, really, really understand it, you know. And then you've got the businesses that I said again, as you say, that the director understands the risk behind it, whether it's a director of a small portfolio or a larger portfolio or a company, etc., etc. I mean, our clients range from Savills, where we monitor 15,000 of properties, down to a individual landlords that just want us to review a portfolio. We do review portfolios of standard private rented sector portfolios and say, okay, look, you should probably look at getting rid of these two. These two should probably be, you know, some serviced accommodation, and these ones should be HMOs, and that would increase the return on investment on that portfolio. And this is how we would see it happening, and this are the steps we need to take. So before we need to go, so if we're going to do HMOs there, and we're going to do short let there, we're going to do a planning assessment on these two. You're going to think about licensing beforehand there. What steps are we going to have to take? Oh, actually, you've got 2 bedrooms that would cost too much to go into changing that. And all these things are kind of are each step of the journey that you need to take, and making sure that you've kind of covered off every single part of it. And again, that isn't largely the do-it-yourself landlord, you know, but the do-it-yourself landlord does come to us, and they pick a part of the journey that they want us to step into, because as I said, yes, there is some people that know 95% of it, and maybe people the kind of do-it-yourself landlord, or the kind of they kind of just get behind it and learn what I can do and do it along the way, and maybe they'll make mistakes, and maybe they won't. But essentially, they're pretty good at kind of like identifying the bit that they need some support on, and that's what we're there for. We're not here to take everybody through an entire journey. We're just here to make sure that where you need us, we're around to support.
And would you say that there's a sort of common denominator that no matter what size of these businesses are or size of these portfolios, that they all seem to slip up on? Is there sort of one thing that really seems to catch a lot of people out?
It's just fire. It's fire safety.
Yeah.
All time. It's interesting because it's one of those parts of the journey that are I think everybody really enjoys. I don't know why. Maybe it's just me. I find that people quite like being knowledgeable in that field, you know.
Yeah.
And like, you maybe, unfortunately, maybe this is the worst thing to say, that you've brought me off here as some sort of expert. And I definitely know some things, and I've been through some journeys, but I still rely on advice. Every single bit of advice that gets delivered to my clients is done by a qualified, accredited, and experienced individual. And that's it. I will prove competence. That's my job. My job is to make sure that you have the right information at the right time and the right person to give you the advice. That's what I do. You know, and that's what we've developed, and why we've had, you know, brought in so many good brands like Hamptons and Berkshire Hathaway and Savills and all the rest of the stuff, around to some of my favorite clients that only have 2 or 3 HMOs, you know, because we get on a really personal level. So yeah, hopefully that explains it.
Definitely. And it's partly down to the mindset of the individual, and how, you know, how open they are to compliance, and how motivated they are to offer a decent product at the end of the day. So is there, in terms of the sort of early warning signs, if you're on this call tonight and you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, I probably could do a little bit more, I do want to offer the best product, and I do want to make sure my tenants are safe, is there anything that you would immediately identify that might be sort of a red flag, or a warning to that individual that they probably need to get involved with a company like YUNO a lot sooner, before it gets to the sort of Des Taylor stage?
Yeah. So yeah, do you have you read and understood every item on your license, on your HMO license? That's a difficult one, because they write it in the strangest of ways. And then the council have changed their approach slightly. So councils used to dictate a lot earlier on in the journey around what you need to do, around fire safety specifically. Now, and then they said there was a dictation, and then there was a backup from the fire brigade, for example, in London, the London Fire Brigade. And then the London Fire Brigade was like, this is far too much work, can you do it yourself? And then the council say, okay, right, everything's now on the fire risk assessor. And then they get the fire risk assessor, but then they critique the fire risk assessor, because every fire risk assessor seems to apply some sort of opinion to it, which is obviously kind of more engineered out in the new British standards around it. But that's the elements of it. It's like, how much do you actually understand? Because and those two elements of it are the license and the fire risk assessment, is where you're going to find your biggest risks. And then so things like, did I get my builder to install my fire doors? That's my big one.
Mm.
Get my builder to install my fire doors. Yeah, cool. So if I have, then have I got an accredited company to survey them? You know, and have I got them to do the fire stopping? And have I got a accredited company to survey it and see if we can get it up to standard? So we always advise that the installer should be accredited, you know. But again, it comes down to proving competence and like how confident are you that you can prove competence? So when it comes to fire safety and the HMO license, it all comes down to that responsible person. So who's the responsible person? That's generally the one that holds the purse strings for the property. So
Yeah.
a responsible person has to instruct a competent person to carry out a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment, which has to apply reasonable and practical actions in a reasonable practical time frame. So that's the terminology. And then it's like, cool. So that's just like nothing but grey, you know, just nothing but grey. So it's like, okay, so how do you put the steps in place to get to fight against that risk? And the interesting thing is like, okay, well, I put a competent fire risk assessor, and it's like, cool. But if the fire risk assessor gets it wrong, then essentially it is her fault for getting it wrong. But at the end of the day, you didn't instruct a competent fire risk assessor.
Yeah.
So when you go to court, they're saying you haven't, and then you have to prove the due diligence behind trying to prove that they're competent. Okay, what's their accreditations? What trainings do they have, etc., etc. And every single action point that comes out of the HMO license or the fire risk assessment has to have a competent person do it. So like, okay, cool, we're getting an electrical cert. They have to be competent and trained. We've got an APEC. We've got all these bits and bobs. We've got the gas safe register and stuff like that, and all the things. But when it comes to fire safety, it's like who's competent to install a fire door? And I've had this conversation so many times. Well, it comes down to the fact, was it installed correctly, and can you prove it? You know, and it's the same thing with fire stopping and all the various other actions that come down to it. And then has it been installed to the right British standards? Can you prove it's been installed to the right British standards? And this all comes down to competency and can you prove they were competent?
I imagine as well, because like surveyors used to do this, you know, even just with a standard home buyers report, they put disclaimers right through it so that they couldn't be legally associated with any sort of you know, signing off of the property, as it were. So I imagine that even if you're getting fire risk assessments done, they'll still put disclaimers in that don't, you know, hold any sort of legal responsibility back to them.
Yeah, I just so it reminds me of like, so basically I built a company called Caledonia Lettings and I sold it just before COVID, and essentially it was 50 rooms, rent to rent model, you know, and we had like half girls, half guys, we had beer and pizza nights and all the various other things. But at that time, that was 10 years ago when I was doing that, and the council advised us to carry out our own fire risk assessments. You know, and there's still councils today that will give you some sort of guidance. Oh, just do your own fire risk assessment. Here's a template. And that big company that I was talking about actually had that. They were doing their own fire risk assessments, and the fire risk assessment was an A4 piece of paper with a couple of check boxes on it with about 7 or 8 questions, and that was their fire risk assessment. And it was not even linked back to the British standards or what was going. It was just basically I kind of picked some stuff up along the way. From council, and I spoke to people, and that wasn't that they weren't trying to do the right thing and they weren't trying to get it right, but it was just a lack of knowledge at the end of the day. And yeah, it's interesting how it's evolved over the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. In terms of questions from our audience, I know Tony has been submitting a couple of questions, and he's quite keen to get them over to you. So we're going to open it up to everyone else. So guys, if you do have any questions for Paul, we would love to hear from you. While we're putting those questions from Tony to Paul, if you want to type them out into the chat box, we'll get through them in the next few minutes. So the first question, if a female tenant becomes pregnant mid-term tenancy, what are the legal steps that can be recommended? I'm not sure that that's
Yeah, that isn't really up my street because that's more
no.
tenancy compliance than property compliance. But yeah, so that is a difficult one for me, and I'm probably just going to say the same to all questions afterwards because I'm absolutely useless. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I would definitely take some legal advice on that and speak to the local council on what to do. And that kind of ties into the kind of next two questions that are like, when you've got clear breaches of behaviors that maybe could be antisocial or et cetera, you're managing tenants. So obviously we had 60 tenants, 66 60 odd tenants over multiple HMOs in southwest London. And when it comes to these things, it's all about communication at the end of the day. And I could answer some of these questions, but they would be based on my knowledge from before the Renters' Rights Act, and now that tenancies are up in a way that it's the whole thing's changed. So as I say, I will send my apologies to Tony, but what I will do is I will take these questions away and try and get Tony an answer for being so useless.
Not a problem. But Tony, what I would say is, just looking at some of the questions that you put into the chat, this is just to echo Paul's sentiments with communication. This is really important. So in the second question, so for people that can't see it, how do you safeguard welfare issues in HMO without stepping over privacy, i.e. red flags that come from domestic abuse, etc.? When behavior affects others, isn't it a clear breach? What do you suggest? So if there is suspected domestic abuse in a property, or there is anything that you suspect is illegal, the best thing that you can do is phone up the HMO officer and also speak to the to Crime Stoppers and to the local police, because ultimately you need to have reported that if you know that is potentially going in on the property. It might not be, it's a suspected crime. It's not a crime that's actually taken place, because you don't have any evidence for that. But what will happen is that if you are not, if you willingly knew about sort of certain incidents that were going on with your tenants in the property, and there's no record of you reporting that, there could become a case where you're legally liable for that. And the last thing you need is the property being raided at 5 a.m. for any sort of antisocial behaviour that's going on in the property, and doors being knocked off the hinges. So it's a collaborative approach that you need to take with either the local authority or the local police force, but as both. And I would certainly recommend speaking to the other tenants to find out exactly what's going on the ground. This sounds like a high maintenance property in terms of the fact that it's the community levels have broken down within that HMO, which means that you will have to invest more of your time in terms of trying to ascertain what's gone on and to try and repair that community, so that if you do have voids within that HMO, you can then quickly refill them, and it becomes a nice environment for someone to move into. If you've got a few bad eggs in there, it's going to spread, and then you will find that your voids will continue and increase until the point where you will have the one remaining tenant that is causing all the problems and 7 other empty rooms, for example. So although that's not legally backed up advice, that's the route that I would take as an agent, is to ascertain who the bad eggs are within the property. If you do suspect something is illegal happening, for example, domestic abuse, you need to have a record of reporting that. Because if you knew about that and the tenants reported to you, or someone's disclosed that to you, and then you've not got a record of sharing that with the proper authorities, that could come back on you.
Yeah, so just reminding, I know you're probably like, which box this off, Paul? That's enough chatting from you. But yeah, so we had a young lass that was in one of our properties in East Dulwich, and we didn't realize at the time, but unfortunately she had a heroin addiction, and then like people were finding her just like asleep on the toilet and all the rest of the stuff, and we just like, a lot of these things are like, look, we're just going to have a chat with you, and kind of worm our way into supporting you out of the property, and that's a hard one, but most of it is about how best you can sell that idea of going away. as
Yeah, and
you know, I think there's support after that. Like we definitely, you know, like she didn't want her to speak to her mum, you know, but we gave her, you know, some advice lines and bits and bobs around that. We had another guy that just, you know, just turned up pissed all the time and annoyed all the other tenants, and he had to have a little talk to, you know. That sounds quite aggressive within a Scottish accent.
Love it.
A little chat, and you know, and that. But yeah, that sounds really horrific, Tony. I'm sorry to hear that you have those sort of problems.
Tony said it's not happening, but I wanted to hear your spin on it. So that was a really good scenario, Tony. I really appreciate that. It is dead interesting. But you mentioned something there really interesting, Paul, which is that you do need to get rid of them, but you know you've got to do it sort of in a caring way, or be seen to be caring. And I think there are two sides to that. There is obviously it's a business. So therefore, you can't have someone disrupting that business, or you know making your other customers feel disrupted. But also, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, someone with a drink or drug addiction, that product, the HMO, is not right for that customer. An establishment or a unit where they can get support for drink and drug abuse is the right product for that customer. And I know that sounds quite brutal putting it down to that, but essentially, if you are trying to edge them out, you are trying to give them the right product to move them onto a place where they're actually going to find that help and support. And it's clearly not within a HMO environment, because there are so many interpersonal relationships that have to work for that to be a nice home for people. So yeah, it's a really interesting point you raise.
I think that they talk about sales and lettings, and the person that has better sales skills is the property manager rather than the negotiator, because the property manager is always selling. They're selling an idea. They're selling, especially in HMO, calm down. You know, like that's probably not a good idea to be like rapping on the door of your the bedroom next door at 3 o'clock in the morning because you wanted them to make you cheesy chips, you know. And like, so like you're always trying to sell the idea of, you know, like just, you know, peaceful living, you know. And that is a really big skill that you have to learn. And I'm definitely not that great at it, but I've tried my best along the way.
Well, that's an interesting point about cheesy chips, and I'll segue it into something. I once lived in an unlicensed HMO when I was a lot younger than I am now, and it was almost like student digs, but it was above a pub. And one guy came home pissed and basically left the chip pan on all night. Now, of course, you wouldn't have a chip pan on in a HMO, but just leaning back into the fireside, like if you've got, you know, multiple people living in a HMO and there's, you know, potentially a lot of cooking going on and a lot of food going on, is there anything you can do on the fire safety to reduce the risk of, you know, one of them potentially coming back and burning the house down through, you know, leaving the stove on or whatever it is?
There's so many cool bits of tech nowadays. So like the expensive versions are like so obviously you get sprinkler systems, and then there's auto mist systems, you know, which will kind of fill a room full of mist so that it suppresses the fire, so you've got less damage from water. And then you get ones that scan the room. So if there's a bit of fire, like sprays water at the fire and it kicks off, you know. And then you get ones that are, then you get these sensors that are constantly looking at a cooker, and it's electric cooker. And what it does, if it sees that it's overheating, then it will cut the power off to the heater. To the cooker, because it's got too much heat. So there's so many variations of technology out there that can solve these problems for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've noticed that a few times, and that's something that we had a tenant in a property once that basically his partner had come back from 2 weeks away and wanted to make the house all nice, and basically put a Yankee candle on in the bathroom and sort of various places around the house. And they went out for a meal and a glass of wine and left the Yankee candle on, and it basically decided to, it was almost at the end anyway, and it got to the end and all the smoke came up, and I think it caused quite a bit of damage in the property, not too far located away from the toilet rolls and all the rest of it. I don't know the exact details, But then obviously the landlord gets a call that potentially the house is on fire. And luckily it wasn't that drastic, but it was, one of those scenarios where tenants do forget things in the property, things do get, set on fire, whether it, be a major blaze or a small blaze. Is there technologies available that do support that? And like you say, there is stuff that takes that peace of mind away, especially if you're a landlord that's run into issues like that in the past.
Sounds like that guy did not get so lucky on his date night.
No, I don't think so.
No.
No, I know the letting agent actually, so we'll check back in with them and find out for you whether they're actually still together. Because I know if I did that, my partner would have dumped me straight there and then.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. I've been dumped for less, to be honest with
you. Surely not.
Mate, I'm banging on about compliance all the time. Come on. Who's going to be hanging about with me? What self-respecting person would be hanging about with me?
It's the language of love. You're a provider, Paul, and therefore providing safety to whatever partner you're in a relationship with, and that should keep the fires burning of any relationship.
Oh, good one. Like it. That's a good ender. That's a good one.
I'm gonna see when I come off this call. I'm just gonna stand in the mirror and go, yes, like that.
Love it. Love it.
Awesome. Guys, if you've got any more questions, we'd love to have them in. But we're going to wrap up for this evening because myself and Paul have had a very long day today, and I'm sure we need to go and stick some Yankee candles on in the bathroom and have a sit down. So we want to thank you all for joining us this evening. Really appreciated your company. And we will be back next week where I'll be joined by Ian Jackson, who is a serial property entrepreneur from Northern Ireland. He was also the host of Belfast Pin. He's going to be talking to us why Northern Ireland is one of the buy-to-let hotspots of the world right now. Most people think buy-to-let is dead in the UK, but Northern Ireland, it seems to be absolutely going through the roof with yields. So please do tune in for that one next Wednesday. We'd love to have you back. But Paul, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our chat, and I'll catch up again with you soon.
Ciao. See you later. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Take care.